Welcome to the Rhymekeeper's Lantern. Tonight's telling comes out of the border dark, from a place of black stone, hard wind, and old reckonings not yet settled. So draw close to the fire, lower your voice, and if you hear a tapping at the shutter before the tale is through, do not answer it. This is the Rhymekeeper's Lantern, and this is tonight's warning. You may look on Hermitage by day and think it is only a hard old keep set in a hard old place. That is the first mistake. By daylight it is stone and wind and the cry of crows turning over the waste. The sheep keep their heads low there. The burn goes by in its own black way. A rider on the road will glance up once and glance away again. As men do at a grave they did not mean to notice. But when the light goes out behind the hills, Hermitage is not only stone. At night the windows are watchers. At night the stair is listening. At night there is a thing about the place that minds who passes and who speaks. Even now folk that have no old blood in them will lower their voices by the road without knowing why. That is how such places keep their due. Not by noise, not by show, by the little turn of the heart that says, not here, not after dark. And if you ask the oldest men why they still make haste by that road when evening falls, they will tell you of Lord Solus and of the one that served him, and they will not give that servant's name lightly. Some call him Robin, some say RedCap. My own grandfather would say only the cap, and spit into the fire after, as if that closed a door. For there are names that are no worse for writing, but should not be called clear into the night. Lord Solus held Hermitage in the old black years, when the borders were lean, and a strong wall was worth more than a prayer, unless the prayer was an old one. He was a hard lord and a secret one. Men said he had a scholar's hand and a hangman's patience. Men said he learned things over the water no priest would bless and no widow would hear told twice. Men said there was a room under the keep where iron cooled wrong and candles guttered blue. That much is wind and telling. This much stayed. No horse liked the inner yard after sunset. No hound would sleep with its muzzle toward the west tower. Milk turned near the kitchen hearth for no reason any woman could name. And sometimes when rain had not fallen for a week, there were wet prints on the stair. Small prints, a child's size, you might say, if the child had been born with claws and had learned to walk with a hop. Where those prints ended, blood would be found after. Not always much, never enough to make a noise over. A smear on a lintel, a thumb mark on a flagstone, a touch at the lip of a basin, just enough to say that something in the house kept itself fresh. You know the old belief, a thing that feeds must feed again. A thing that is kept must be paid. And this one was kept well. They said his cap was not red by cloth or dye, but by renewing. They said he dipped it now and again, that it might not pale. They said he was no higher than a young bairn, but broad in the chest and quick as a stoat under the hand. Iron-shod boots, teeth like oat-white pegs, eyes with no shine in them till a lantern caught them, and then too much. But the worst of him was not his look. The worst was his manner. He did not rage. He did not howl. He did not spring out like a beast to make a tale worth carrying. He went about his lord's harm like a careful servant, beforehand, behind doors, under chairs, at the foot of the stair, with a hand on the latch and a laugh that never rose above a breath. That is the sort that lasts in memory, not the thing that tears, the thing that waits. There was an old saying on the border once, and my mother's mother would not speak it whole. She would go no further than caps, and then stop. That was enough for her, enough to put the shutters to. Now hear how the matter ripened. There was a widow in the wasteland near Hermitage, with one son and a strip of poor ground. The boy was taken to service at the castle, being quick with his hands and eager to rise. That is how it starts in half the bad tales of the borders, with hunger and a gate opening. For a time the widow thought herself fortunate. The boy came home with shoes that matched and silver enough to mend the byre roof. But he would not eat till the door was barred. He would not sleep save under a blanket his mother had crossed 3 times with ash from the hearth. And once when she asked him what frightened him so, he said only, "Mother, if you hear a bairn at the window, and the voice says it is cold, do not look." She struck him for that, thinking he mocked the dead. He took the blow and thanked her for it. The last she saw of him was at Martinmas. He stood by the door, half in dark, and would not cross fully into the firelight. His face was pale as a turnip root kept too long in earth. "What is it?" she said. He looked toward Hermitage, though the castle could not be seen from there. "He rinses the cap," said the boy, "and his lord says grace over it." Then he went back before dawn, and was not seen again. That widow's grief ran through the countryside as grief does in lonely places, not loud, but far. Men began to count their own missing more closely. A drover's lad, a serving girl, one old man from the hill path who had no kin to ask after him. The reckonings did not come right. And whenever folk gathered to speak low of it, something spoiled the speaking. A tether would come loose. A horse would rear in the dark. A child would wake shrieking from sleep, though no dream could be got out of them after. Once at the alehouse near the crossing, a man stood up and swore he would name Sulis for what he was, and bring half the dale against him by dawn. Before he reached the door, the fire on the hearth sank down as if a lid had gone over it. The room turned cold in one breath, and all at once there came from under the settle a little knock. Knock, knock, like a boot heel trying patience on oak. No one moved. When the innkeeper at last stooped and looked beneath, there was nothing there but a wet red smear no bigger than the palm of his hand. The man who had spoken loudest was gone by morning, though his horse was still tied outside. After that, folk held their tongues more dearly. But a fear that is fed long enough becomes a stubborn thing. It turns in the end. It bites back. So it was said among the Elliots and Armstrongs and the hard men along Liddesdale that Sulis had a safeguard on him not born of God, that no common bond would hold him, and no common steel would finish him. Only a thing thrice made might take him. Only a thing impossible enough to please hell. And the word came down, whether from priest, crone, or wise fool, no two tellings agree, that he must be tied with threefold ropes of sifted sand. Now you and I may laugh by day at such counsel. Sand is no rope. Sand runs through the hand and minds no knot. That is why the saying carries weight. A protection made by wicked craft is often broken only by a work that asks for more faith than sense. So the women sifted, and the old men twisted, and the young ones held their breath and did not mock. 3 ropes they made, if rope it may be called, sand fine as meal, wetted, worked, plaited with charms older than kirk bells, and laid in the dark to dry where no dog would cross the threshold. Yet each night some mischief came. In one house the braid was found slack and fallen as loose dust. In another, the bowl of sifted sand had been fouled by blood from no cut thing. In a third, little footprints crossed the board from sill to hearth and out again, with no door opened and no latch stirred. At last, one man watched through till dawn with a Bible in one hand and iron in the other. He was called Hob o' the Side, at least that is the name I heard first, and it will serve as well as another. He set no candle, but sat by the dim red eye of peat fire and listened to the house breathe. Near cock-crow he heard it. Not at the door, not at the window, at the cradle that had stood empty since winter. A small sound, not crying, not laughter, just the soft patting of a hand where no hand should be. Hob did not look at once. That saved him. Then came a whisper, low and busy, like a woman mending thread with dry lips. Loose for a lord, loose for a lord. He turned then and thrust the iron out, and there by the cradle crouched a thing no taller than a child of 5, with a cap dark in the room but wet where the peat glow touched it, and long hands busy at the sand braid as if unpicking lace. It showed him its teeth. He struck at it and hit only the cradle board. The room stank at once of wet earth and open stone. The thing was gone, but on the board where it had crouched were 5 red finger marks, and the rope, nearly finished before, lay all in ruin. That is the witness as it was told to me. Take it or leave it. I tell it as old men told it, and old women crossed themselves after. In the end they took Sulis from Hermitage. How they drew him out differs from hearth to hearth. Some say a false summons, some say prayer, some say a bell rung backward, but all agree on this. They had the 3-fold bonds at last, and they set them on him at Ninestane Rig, where old places have long memories and the ground itself seems to listen. And when the ropes touched him, he changed countenance. Till then he had borne himself proud, like a man that kens his bargain holds. But when the sand braids went round him, he looked not at the crowd, nor at the priest, nor at the stones. He looked behind him. That is always the telling that chills me, for men look behind them only when they know who truly owns them. Some say the cap was there on the rig among the bent grasses, hopping from stone shadow to stone shadow, unable to come near but unwilling to depart. Some say he called once, like a child shut outside in frost. Some say he laughed. And when the work was done and Sulis had gone to whatever keeps such reckonings, the little red-headed servant fled back to Hermitage and was heard thereafter, though never seen clear again save by those whose luck had already broken. Not every night, not every year, but enough. Enough that the warning stayed. Enough that mothers drew the latch before moonrise and fathers set iron near the bed. Enough that no one by sense would answer a tapping low on the shutter if it came in 3 small knocks. Enough that men passing Hermitage after dark kept their eyes from the windows, however certain they were that some face had moved there. For the old thing about such servants is this: the Lord goes down, but the service does not always end. Habit is a deep chain, so is hunger. And places remember the shape of their evil, even when the body is ash and the name is prayer-worn. So listen well. If ever you go by Hermitage late and your horse shortens breath for no cause, do not spur him toward the gate. If ever you hear a child voice ask admittance where no child should be, give no answer. If ever you see on dry stone a small wet print darkening to red, do not stoop to measure it. And if some old wife by the border begins a half-rhyme of caps and captains and the devil's own due, do not ask her for the rest. There are old verses that are safer broken. There are old servants that listen for their names. And there are castles in Scotland where the windows are only windows by day. You have been listening to the Rhymekeeper's Lantern. If this warning lingers with you, if some part of it stays just beyond the firelight, then keep the lantern near. And remember, if something was set down, out of place, it was done for a reason. Until next time, keep the lantern lit. Old rhymes, dark warnings. Never sing the last line.